Supreme Court victory for President Trump. The nation's high court cleared the way yesterday to reinstate key aspects of the president's travel ban. The executive order will go into effect on Thursday, while justices will hear full arguments on the merits of this case in the fall. President Trump praising the ruling in a tweet last night, saying, quote, "Great day for America's future security and safety, courtesy of the U.S. Supreme Court. I will keep fighting for the American people and win." Joining us this morning is American Islamic Forum for Democracy President and founder, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Dr. Jasser, your thoughts on this ruling?
Well, Dagan, the president and commander-in-chief has a right to protect our country, and he set aside the politics, he set aside the identity politics that the left have used us Muslims for their own wedge politics. The rule of law prevails. The court has ruled and said that, listen, he has a right to identify countries that are teeming with jihadists, teeming with Islamists, and the most important thing they said is that they upheld the lower court's ruling that there can be a pause that would begin that allows them to look at the vetting procedures. That's what this is all about. Nobody's saying that there aren't homegrown terrorists, there aren't other sources. What they're saying is that the president can name certain countries whose governments are unreliable, who are often antagonists, and who will never really be helping us in vetting. So therefore, the court has basically said, stop paying attention to what was said in the campaign, other things. Let's look at exactly what was written in this executive order, and 9-0, they've said that they will uphold it. And even with the three justices, Alito and Thomas and Gorsuch, have basically said, you know what, it should have been basically all allowed in, because this is going to stimulate more litigation because of the question of who has connections to America, etc. But that will all be resolved in October.
Hi, James Freeman here with the Wall Street Journal. Wondering what you'd like to see in extreme vetting. Do you have certain things in mind that you'd like to see the administration doing now that it has this time to, and perhaps ultimately, if it wins in court, we'll have the opportunity to implement this policy?
That's a great question, because that's why many Muslims I know are in favor of this, because there's nothing more pro-Muslim than letting Americans feel comfortable that people coming into this country that are Muslims, that believe in America, want to be free, escape theocracy, escape dictatorship, are not Islamists. So I want to see the axis of American security shift from countering violent extremism to countering violent Islamism. And in this pause, I hope the president uses this opportunity to convene that Commission on Radical Islam, to start looking at Muslim reformers to help guide a policy that shifts away from the symptom, which is extremism and violence, and looks to the ideology of jihadism and Islamism, because there's nothing more pro-Muslim than saying that America welcomes Muslims that share our values and rejects anyone, Muslim or non-Muslims, that don't share our values, be they Islamists or be they fascist Baathists or others that believe in non-American, non-free ideology.
Zuhdi, Lonnie Chen has a question for you.
Yeah, Dr.
Yes.
Jasser, I'm just wondering, in terms of this actual decision, what you saw was three justices come together, Justice Thomas, Alito, and of course the new justice, Justice Neil Gorsuch, saying they would have allowed this thing to take effect in full. How do you see this going as we move toward the Supreme Court again, taking this up in the fall? Where do you see this going? Do you see this going the way that Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas have argued?
I hope so, because one of the reasons Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas made the punctuation that they did is we already see the Islamists and the far left trying to use the next couple of months to further rip apart our country and say that this is ignoring anti-Muslim bigotry and will open the gates of further litigation, which is what Justice Thomas wrote. So I hope they quickly move. They may even render an opinion sooner, because I think most of the justices realize you can't pick and choose words and verbiage used during the campaign to hold the president accountable for what he's writing on paper in an executive order that his Secretary of Homeland Security and others are trying to use to keep our country safe. So I hope what we see moving forward is the marginalization of the noise of identity politics and looking to what we can do to keep our country safe and engage Muslims that believe in the values of this country.
On that note, there's some tech titans who are teaming up to fight the spread of extremism online. Facebook, Microsoft, YouTube, and Twitter announcing a new anti-terrorism partnership yesterday, dubbed the New Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism. The companies will focus on preventing any online recruiting efforts by extremist groups. Dr. Jasser, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think it's a great step. They're already so far behind, believe it or not. One of the radicals that radicalized the Manchester bombers was Imam Jibril out of Dearborn, and yet the FBI will tell you they can't do much to get him offline because he hasn't violated a sort of a imminent threat of violence, and yet he was recruiting many ISIS folks. So what do we do with that? But we have to remember the tech giants are simply, again, looking at calls to violence and terrorism. They're not looking at Islamism and jihadism. They need to work with reformers to help bolster the message of Muslims who are for liberty, for sexual equality, for the rights of universal human rights. Those are things that we are just completely losing the battle to the Al Jazeeras, the Qatars of the world that are spreading the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood and the underbelly of radical Islam, which is the theocratic basis of Islam that Muslims are not engaged in, and the tech giants have a huge platform to enable reformers, but meanwhile they've marginalized us to the identity politic lobbies.
These tech giants do have such an ability to get involved here, but they're still companies. Do you think maybe it's time, we have a cyber command in the United States, but do you think it's time that we really establish a cyber force, like an Air Force or a Navy, a cyber force, because cyber really is becoming the new frontier when it comes to defense?
I couldn't agree more on the tool. We need cyber force because this is a war of ideas. We will never win this whack-a-mole program on the military battlefield. But the cyber area is a tool. We need to convene, like a Manhattan Project or in the Cold War we convened a countering communism ideology group. We need to convene Muslims and non-Muslims that are going to counter violent Islamism and begin to strategize how we promote liberty domestically and abroad. Because I have to tell you, we can do things in America that you just can't do in Syria, Iraq, or across the Middle East. We have an obligation and a responsibility to convene forums of Muslim reformers that will take on the theocrats of Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and even in Europe, Islamists in America that are not sharing our values, and the cyber part of it is the tool. We have to focus on the ideas that would be disseminated against radical Islam globally.
Just really quickly, Zuhdi, I just wanted to point out to Leo's question, we do have a cyber command in the United States, but the Wall Street Journal has pointed this out. Back in 2013, the Departments of Defense, Homeland Security, and the FBI and other agencies required 75 drafts of a single PowerPoint presentation a slide to define their respective division of responsibilities for cybersecurity. 75 drafts of one PowerPoint slide.
Right.
But that's the bureaucracy gets in the way of actually doing something.
It absolutely does. And when you look at cyber, the issue is bigger than just the messaging with cyber. You have to look at infrastructure. You have to look at things like the way Russians influenced the election, according to the intelligence community. It's such a big problem. Cyber truly is the new frontier. And I think it's really time that we start looking at having a cyber force similar to Air Force, similar to the Navy. It's time.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.